I'm excited about today's topic because a lot of you have been asking me about this, and I've responded to a lot of DMs. And so I just thought this is just a perfect time to come on here live and then just always have it in my IGTV in terms of what in the heck is the Enneagram? What are you talking about? And what do I do with it? And how do I learn more about it? How do I find my number? And I think most importantly, like, why should I even care? So I'm just going to tell you my story and how I use it and how I'm using it personally. And then I want to talk to you about how I'm going to be using it professionally in my coaching because it's been so powerful for me. So I'll back up, and I would say the year would have been 2006. I started to learn about actually the Myers-Briggs type indicator. Now, many of you may or may not have heard about the Myers-Briggs, but like when I took this, it's a personality type indicator, and it was such a huge aha for me in terms of like, oh, like how I act and how I perceive the world and like how I move through life. Like there's actually other people like this, and now I kind of have a name for it. So in the Myers-Briggs world, I'm an INTJ. So that tells me that I'm an introvert. I prefer to get my energy from, alone time, solitude activities, that sort of thing, versus extroverts get their energy from lots of interactions with people. I knew that I was an intuitive, which means I like to think in theories and abstract concepts and imagine ideas versus taking things in step by step by step by step. Like my husband loves nothing more than a list of step-by-step instructions. Hard pass. I'm a thinker over a feeler, which means I make decisions based on logic, pros, cons, etc. And versus maybe creating harmony or personal values or personal circumstances. And then my approach to life is a J, which means I like timelines. I'm very timeline driven. I like to have a plan versus people who are Ps, which is the opposite, are very open. So learning that I was an INTJ was really enlightening. It helped me understand what my strengths were of that type. And it also helped me understand what my blind spots were, especially when it came to communication, to the way that I approach life, and even the way I made decisions. I realized that not everybody makes decisions like me, views the world like me. And I think as a young professional, I was like, oh, okay, this is good to know. But the thing is about the Myers-Briggs, I loved it. I still use it. And when I think it comes to teams and conflict, I think it is an incredibly helpful tool to help others realize where there are friction points in the way that we see the world and make decisions. Huge, huge conflict point. But it never told me why I was an INTJ. It never told me what was the driving factor. Like, why do I show up in the world that way? What is it about the way that my ego spans the world that makes me show up that way? So it was probably about 6 years ago was the first time I'd ever even heard of the Enneagram. And Ennea means 9, and gram just means like a written document, okay? So there's 9 types. That's where the 9 comes from. And I was like, Enneagram. I'm like, what in the world is that? I've never seen that in the business world. Like, of course, I'm like a super skeptic because I'm like, has it been proven? So I just kind of like let it float by me. And I think sometimes like it gets cheapened a little bit because like we see things out on Instagram like, hey, here, if you're a type 5 on the Enneagram, here's the kind of socks you like. And I think you can tend to do that with any sort of personality test. And, but it kept coming back in front of me. And somebody who I love to follow, I read a lot of his books and listen to a lot of his podcasts, was Richard Rohr. I love using his work for my morning devotional. And he was talking about the Enneagram, and he was one of the first people to really start making this a more talked about concept in terms of personality in, I would say the US, in Europe and other places it's been more prominent. Well, come to find out, this is like an ancient personality typing system. Like it's actually been around, like they can trace it back to like the 4th century. And so I started to be like, okay, well, if he's talking about it, I'm curious. And so a couple of years ago, I took the assessment from the Enneagram Institute, and it's just enneagraminstitute.com. And it actually came back and said I was high in the numbers of 1 and 9. And since 1 and 9 are next to each other on the Enneagram chart, it means I'm a 1 wing 9. One wing 9. I'm a little bit of 1, I'm a little bit of 9. Well, I want you to know that with the Enneagram, and this is one of the things I'm going to talk about when it comes to finding your number, tests are actually only about 50-60% accurate. So I started to follow anything I could about the Enneagram, podcasts, Instagram accounts, books. I didn't talk about it a lot because I was such a Myers-Briggs person that I'm like, I really need to understand this before I start talking about it. And I think as you'll learn and what I'm going to reveal here in a second about what my real number is, I don't like to talk about things unless I believe I am some sort of expert or I have some sort of competence. So just the fact that I'm going to talk about this today, when I still feel new into it, is it's a leap. I'm just going to tell you that. So after looking at this for over a year, Sheila, you were laughing at that. Oh my gosh, I know. And I realized, and I actually took a different assessment because I'm looking to get, I'm getting certified in December through a company called the Integrative Enneagram Solutions. They have the IEQ9 test. It's actually 175 questions. It's actually considered the most accurate. They get the type right 90% of the time. I started testing as a 5. And I'm like, I read the description and I'm like, I had this stereotype that 5s were computer nerds, hiding behind a screen, technical junkies, a stodgy old professor, which, spoiler alert, guys, I was a college professor for 4 years. So I'm just saying. And so it's fascinating because I was like, oh my gosh, I read this and I almost felt like a shame bath come over me because it finally explained, back to my Myers-Briggs story, why I showed up that way. It finally told me this is why you show up in the world as an INTJ. And that was a huge aha for me because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is helping us understand why we do things. And so learning that I was actually a 5, and it's not uncommon to mistype yourself, especially as you're kind of, learning all about this, and that's okay. And I discovered that, and here's the thing about the 9 types. So they say there are 9 types, and we all have basic core fears, okay? And that's, of course, all driven by our ego. And we all have core desires. So my core fear as a type 5 is basically to look incompetent. And because I'm so fearful of looking incompetent, Stacy, the name of that test is the IEQ9. It's by Integrative Enneagram Solutions. Because I'm so fearful of looking incompetent, I would often withhold my ideas. I wouldn't show up fully, even though I was, competent and capable. I wouldn't go out and be in the world because I'm like, oh, I don't know enough yet. But I will tell you that one of my number one fears, and this is often what held me back in corporate America, and now that I'm starting, I've been running my own business, is always my ego's talk track. What if people think this is stupid? And every Enneagram type has that core fear, that core talk track. Ones they say has an inner critic, and it's a little bit louder than others. So discovering this about yourself can really help you understand what is your core fear and how is that driving your behavior. And when I think about personal growth and development and being a coach, imagine what you could accomplish if you could kind of name what your core fear is and how that holds you back and what you're subconsciously doing. The thing is this didn't really come to light for me. I had no idea I was subconsciously doing that. So Sheila, you're a 4 and that's fear of abandonment. Yes, absolutely. So the thing about the Enneagram is that, and there's an account that I love, it's called Enneagram Unfolding, and I'll put this in the comments below. And she talks about how a lot of the Enneagram teachers talk about this, is that the Enneagram doesn't tell us how we show up because behaviors can show up a lot of different ways. So if I have a fear of being incompetent and a type 4 has a fear of abandonment, that fear is the same, and it's going to drive us to act a certain way, but the way we actually show up and respond to that fear can look very, very different. But by understanding like where that fear is coming from, I can do my own work. The other thing about a 5 that has held me back is that 5s love to live in their heads. So my life inside my head is way more exciting than the outside world. I'm just going to tell you that. And anybody who is a 5 will understand. They're going to go, yeah, girl, you are totally on the right track. And we tend to, they say that our sin is that we withhold or we are greedy, but not necessarily greedy with money. We're greedy with our time and energy, and nothing is more true. And I'm totally outing myself. But knowing this about myself helps me go, you know what? Am I not signing up for this? Am I not showing up? Am I not going out and being in the world and doing the things that I need or want to do because I fear I'm going to run out of energy? Like, just knowing these things help me go, oh, okay, like this is the thing that's holding me back from my true calling. So again, this is totally meant to be just kind of a primer. What in the world is the Enneagram? I'm using myself just as kind of, an example of how I'm using this. The Enneagram is amazing, and I'm going to start using it in my coaching practice. I officially get certified in December, so I've talked with some clients about it, but I'm so excited to have the tools to dig in more. But Enneagram also provides you with levels of development. So there's unhealthy, moderate, and then healthy. So it kind of almost gives you a roadmap that depending on what your number is, here's how you can evolve to your best self. The other thing I love about the Enneagram versus like a Myers-Briggs is Myers-Briggs, they always say, well, it puts me in a box. Okay. Yes, it absolutely can put you in a box. You're an INTJ and this is who you are, and that's it. And those are your preferences, and your preferences say that you should always act out of your preferences and your preferences don't change. And there's some truth to that. But the thing that I love about the Enneagram, and I'm going to show you guys some resources that I'm loving, okay, so you guys can use it too, is a gentleman by the name of Dr. Jerome Luby. You can see there's a little brain on here. And he says, and a lot of the teachers say, the cool thing about the Enneagram is it actually already shows you what box you're in and how to get out of it. I like that. And he believes that we are whole-brained beings, which is so true. I so believe that. So just because I'm a 5 doesn't mean I don't have access to all the other centers in my brain. And in fact, one of the things I use in my coaching is that to be your most effective self and to be an effective leader and to be a confident leader and move through your life with more confidence, it is actually beneficial for you to learn how to access all the other numbers that you already have inside of you. So in fact, this is deep stuff. I'm not going to touch on this too much today, but a 5, when they're at their most healthy, actually will show up as a type 8. So there's access to other numbers, and when I'm stressed I go to a 7, but that's too much for today. So anyways, some resources that you can go to if you're curious about finding your number. So this one's a little more advanced. Dr. Jerome Luby, again, he's a neuroscientist. He showed that actually if you lay the Enneagram diagram on the brain and you flip it over and like lay it on top of the brain, like the numbers and what their strengths are actually align with the centers in the brain that will actually drive a lot of those motivations and behaviors. Like, it's super fascinating, and I didn't do that enough justice just now. So check that out. The book that I recommend for people who are just getting into the Enneagram is The Road Back to You. It's by Ian Cron. He has an amazing podcast called the Typology Podcast. And I love it. He has all sorts of guests, and each chapter has like a little questionnaire that can help you determine your number, because you can read through it and say, okay, how many of these sound like me? In fact, that's how my husband found his type. Sheila, I know you loved The Road Back to You, and Stacey, you just said your core fear is that people won't enjoy something I am responsible for. So spoiler alert, well, not spoilers, Stacey, if you're watching this live, said that she is a 7. And 7s, absolutely, like their drive is for fun and excitement. Like, they never want the party to end. They're always looking for like that next great idea. But they do all that because they want to avoid pain. They want to avoid feeling uncomfortable feelings. So they manufacture fun so they don't have to feel uncomfortable. And so knowing that is super helpful because you can start to ask yourself questions. Am I doing this because I'm trying to avoid pain? In my case, am I acting this way because I believe I have a limited supply of energy, or that people might think I'm stupid? And Sheila says this book is a great for understanding your spouse. Yes. And so is The Path Between Us, which is similar in this. The other book that I just got and I'm really loving, and she has a great account on Instagram, is The Honest Enneagram. I know it's kind of hard to see because it's a light cover. Plus, I love the aesthetic of the book. And her name is Sarah Jane Case, but on Instagram here, she's known as Enneagram and Coffee. And she has this book is a really good baseline understanding, help you find your type, and to know what to do with it. So I really like it. And Stacey, you said you're taking her course right now. I really like Sarah Jane Case's work, and she's got a good podcast too. So another helpful app that I really enjoy, whose test I thought was pretty accurate, is you can download the Enneagram app, Ennea app on your phone. And it'll have you take just a test on your phone. I felt like it was pretty accurate. And I always tell people, like, whatever top 2 numbers you get, look at both numbers and then read the descriptions of those numbers either via the EnneagramInstitute.com. That's a great place to read about your type, or through one of these books. And you'll know. You'll know if it's your type because you're like, my secrets are outed. Like, I've been discovered. That's how I felt. I felt outed for like 3 days. I couldn't even talk about it. I'm like, I thought I was a 1. I was all proud to be a 1. And I'm like, nope, I'm a 5. I am a hardcore 5. So anyways, that's just a little bit about the Enneagram. So some of my favorite resources, I'll drop them in the comments below so you guys can easily find them. But the thing, guys, that I think has been really awesome in the way that I approach my coaching is that I tell women that they should live their lives using all of their centers of intelligence. So if you've been in corporate a long time, lots of times we're all taught to only use our minds, right? Pros, cons, logic, all that sort of thing. Well, the Enneagram actually says that there are 3 centers of intelligence, okay? So 8s, 9s, and 1s, they live in the body center, okay? 2s, 3s, and 4s, they live in the heart center. And then 5s, 6s, and 7s live in the head center. And so one of the things that I love about the Enneagram and why I'm choosing to bring it into my coaching is because I often talk about centers of intelligence and how we need to trust our ways of knowing with all of our centers of intelligence. So how do I use my mind to make great decisions? Logic, data, facts, spreadsheets. I love my spreadsheets. How do I use my body, my instincts, my gut, my intuition? How do I know when my body says yes and no? And then how do I also use my heart? Okay, my values. What's in alignment with my values? What's my, what's my next best step there? So it's not about overusing one. It's about using all 3. So I hope this ramble was just a little bit more on the Enneagram, why I love it and how I want to use it in my coaching, because at the end of the day, I tell all my leaders, we cannot develop our teams. We cannot develop our kids. We cannot develop our relationships to a higher level than we've developed ourselves. It always starts with us. And that's why I love the Enneagram so much, is because we spend time and energy to help you grow into your calling and the person you've been called to be, and use your strengths and work through your blind spots so you can grow. Because the more you grow, the more capacity you have to coach others to grow as well. So I hope this was helpful. Tag a friend that you think might enjoy this. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And I'll keep sharing this as I learn it. I will push out of my boundaries as a 5, and I will share things maybe before my mind tells me I know enough. So anyways, have an amazing weekend, and I will see you guys here on Instagram again soon.